All right. Thanks for tuning in and listening. I'm Nan, and you're listening to Nan Man's Nerd Corner, or NMNC, which just kind of makes me think of TNMT. But this is, of course, our own little nerdy corner of the internet, and I've got a little bit of a revamp show for you guys today because we are going to be rocking it out with a co-host, and we've got Jaime with us. How you doing, my dude? Thanks for joining us as the new face of the nerdy corner of the internet.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me in. I really appreciate this opportunity, and hopefully through our conversations and discussions, we'll have a good time.
I'm sure we will. So if you guys have listened to the show before, you know we talk about all things nerdy, and that's kind of the big thing, right? The goal of this podcast is to kind of have that feel and set up the mindset that you're hanging out in an LGS, a local game store, and it's the kind of conversations that you might hear when you're in there. So people talking about things like comic books, Magic the Gathering, tabletop, video games, you know, all the above in the nerdy world. So that's kind of our mindset when we're doing this. And this week we thought it would be good to kind of dive into that nerdy world through that discussion of collecting things. So this week we'll kind of do a little breakdown, talk to you guys about, you know, maybe quantify a collection, if you will. How much is something to be considered a collection? We'll talk a little bit about some of the collections that we have. We'll talk about maybe selling out of a collection, buying into collections, the financial aspect of it, and then kind of wrap it up like we always do every week with kind of discussing what you're watching, what you're playing, what you're reading, all that kind of good stuff. So let's kind of get it started. Jaime, what do you think? What is the size, like, in your brain, if you're like, okay, this is a collection, what do I think for it?
Sure. Yeah, so that's a very good question, and I had put a little bit of thought into this. I struggled with a good answer per se, because for me, I think a collection isn't necessarily it isn't limited by its size. I think as long as there's like an intent to collect and you're trying to get, you know, you're trying to develop a collection, you could have 2, 3, 4, 5, you could have 100. I think as long as there's that intent behind wanting to have something for an indefinite period of time or a long period of time, whether its value goes up or down, is really kind of how I would measure a collection. Obviously, for a lot of us who collect, the piles stack up sometimes. So there's a lot of it. I think when you're collecting cards, people have, you know, hundreds of cards. There's people who collect hundreds of figures, statues, Hot Wheels. I know is another really popular thing. But yeah, I think as long as you want to hold on as long as you want to hold on to something, treasure it. You know, it could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 100, 1,000, whatever you want that number to be.
Interesting. So that's the question I was going to ask. Like, is 2 a collection? Like, if you have 2 of something, like I have 4, 5 swords now. I guess that's like a collection, not a collection that I like went out of my way that goes, I'm going to start collecting swords. They just sort of come into my possession over the years. But I guess, like, if you think about, well, if you compare it to like you that has 0 swords, I have a collection of swords. Is that how you have to compare it? As like somebody that doesn't have something. So like if I had 2 of something, is that enough to be a collection?
Yeah, I would argue it is, as long as there's intent behind that. So as long as you are holding on to the swords because you like the design and you're collecting, you know, you're essentially holding on to them for some particular reason, as opposed to just having them there, I think that would be considered a collection. You know, I have like 10 keys on my keychain, but I'm not collecting those keys because there's no intent to collect the keys.
Actually, no. Do you know where all those keys go to? Do you still have access to all those? Are you collecting old keys? Because I think I have at least 1 or 2 on my keychain that are old that probably should be not on there anymore.
I think when we start talking about that, we're starting to blur that line between like hoarding and actually collecting, because like we might be hoarding keys. Instead of actually collecting them for whatever purpose we might have for them. But yeah, I think if you're holding on to something, there is some sort of sentimental value behind it. You like the sword, you like the you're using them for decoration of some sort or whatever. I think, I would consider that a collection. Maybe a smaller collection, but definitely a collection.
That makes sense. Now, one thing I was going to say is you have a bunch of stuff as well. I say between our friend group, I probably have the largest collection, or the most collections, maybe, I guess is the way to put it. I've collected the most things over the years. If you're looking at the stuff that you've collected, what would you say is like your number one, this is my top collection of things?
Well, it's tough, right? Because I think for me personally, I have, we're going to call it diversified the portfolio throughout the years. I've moved from different types of collections. So, I started when I was young collecting cards. And then as I got more buying power as you get older, which you do, and got into different types of hobbies, I started collecting different things. I would say my largest collection right now is, and the Gunpla community will kind of, anyone who does Gunpla will laugh at this, is essentially my backlog of Gundams that I yet to build. So I have quite a few boxes that I need to get through and build them up, but I've really recently gotten into the whole like mecha and building Gundam kits and such, and it's really an enjoyable time. Plus it's like it almost feels like a piece of art, something you've put together and you can display and people can ask you questions about it, and the process is just enjoyable. But I would say currently it's definitely unbuilt Gundam kits / built Gundam kits, and then statues from different games that I've collected.
That makes sense. And I think that is a really good point that you said your two ones, right? The Gundam kits and the statues that you go, okay, I started out in like the TCG world and collecting cards and, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, all that sort of stuff. And now like you said, your buying power has increased. You go, okay, what else can I get into? And then you see this thing you like, I'm going to buy this, and then it goes to the next one. Oh, I'm going to buy that one now, and then your collection grows and grows and grows. I that's something to be said about that kind of progression through life, right? If you go, okay, you know what, now I find this more enjoyable, so I'm going to start collecting this, and that diversity where I'm like, okay, well, I haven't gotten rid of my old collections, but now I've diversified my collections and spread it out into so many different things that I enjoy. Right? Like I still have a lot of the TCG stuff. I have a very large Magic collection. I have some Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I have some Pokemon cards. Right. I got a lot of the TCG stuff. I also have comic book stuff. Of course, a lot of Spider-Man. But I've also gotten more into the kind of trade backs, the bigger books instead of just the weeklies, the monthlies, because that one was that financial pit of going, oh, every week a new book comes out, I need to go and buy a new book, and then you end up buying more books, and then it's just like, oh, there's so many books, and so it's easier to go, okay, I could just buy a trade back or this bigger books that has a couple months worth of stories all put together into one thing. So that's been one of those changes of going, okay, you know what, I'll collect this, or now I've gotten back into collecting manga again because it's like, I could just buy all the books now. I don't have to just buy one at a time. I could drop that money because I am an adult. With adult money I can spend it on these things.
Yeah, I'd be interested to. Obviously, I'll share mine, but I'd be interested to hear from you first and for everyone else. What got you started into collecting? Because I know we've briefly also touched on, spending money and buying power and kind of the pitfall that can be as adults collecting. But as we talk a little bit more about that, I'd be curious, what was your first collection and what got you really into collecting, period?
I mean, I think, it's easy to go on that nostalgia kick of the reason why I continue to collect the things that I collect. But, we're millennials, right? We were around at the boom of the shift where it's like, here's all these things that are designed for you. Everything's colorful and bright, and here's these great cartoons and cool stuff and toys that are marketed just for you, and like it caught me. It sunk its teeth into me, that idea of collecting things. And I fell in love with TCGs back then. Of course, played the Pokemon games, like both like on the Game Boys, and then of course the card games themselves. I was much bigger into collecting the Pokemon cards back then than I was of playing. Like, I learned how to play back then, but then we got into Yu-Gi-Oh much quicker.
Yes.
And then it became a competitive thing. Oh, we're going to compete, and we're going to go to regional tournaments, and we're going to play the weekly tournaments, and that it became this kind of competition aspect to it. So there's that, but even though I got rid of most of my Pokemon cards, which I'm kicking myself for now with how much they're worth, I did, like in college, go, you know what, I want to play Pokemon again, and bought a couple of those like packs, like the theme decks. Like there was like the early 2000s, like late 90s ones. There was like the Overgrowth and Brushfire and Zap and these like combination ones were like, it's like lightning and grass and fighting and water and fire, like all these combination ones. And so they're little like theme decks that you could just like shuffle up and play. So I bought a couple of those, and now they're like going for like, I bought them for like $20 or something. Now they're going for like $200. So it's crazy to see how much some of those have changed. But so I think it's like, it's that nostalgia kick. The reason, like in college, where I go, I want to get those Pokemon stuff because I remember collecting those back when I was younger. I'm gonna buy into this, even if I just play once or twice or just have the cards lying around. It's that nice of like, I remember this. It kind of kicks that memory back in my brain of, I remember when we were collecting, or it was a thing. Like it was banned from our elementary school because of kids collecting and play, like these memories that I don't think about, but it's something that when I hold the card, that like scratches that part of my brain to kick that stuff off.
It's funny you say that. So I very similarly got into collecting as well through Pokemon. So Pokemon was a big thing. When we were kids in an elementary school, it just skyrocketed, and then in middle school and so on. And I started collecting the Pokemon cards, and then we pretty quickly, both of us, honestly, about the same time, I think, ended up getting into Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a big collection thing for us. I mean, we were, building decks and making various decks, and to get, when you're collecting a trading card game where you're competing and playing at a competitive level, and you have various decks, you're going to have to collect duplicates of certain cards. You're looking for rare cards and things like that. So it kind of forced us to half be resourceful, half spend our money that we were earning in whatever little job we were doing to kind of roll the dice with booster packs and things like that. But yeah, for me personally, definitely it was Pokemon and the idea of Pokemon. And I mean, not too long ago, Pokemon and Ash just recently ended, and he finally got his championship, and that was nostalgia for a lot of people who grew up with Pokemon, because you remember watching the first couple episodes of Pokemon and Ash Ketchum trying to be a Pokemon master, and he finally gets the goal, like happening kind of in our lifetime, and retiring that story and moving on to the next thing. So I think it's funny that we touched a little bit on that nostalgic aspect as well, because a lot of stuff has made a resurgence because of that nowadays. I think with the pandemic, people were trapped. It boosted collecting in general, but I think people got back into older hobbies, and then that nostalgic effect of, I used to collect baseball cards when I was a kid, or I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! When I was a kid, or I used to play Magic the Gathering, really like multiplied during the pandemic and caused people to like really get back into it. Now after after shops have opened up and things have kind of normalized a little bit, people have really gone back into those hobbies really strong, probably stronger than I've seen them in a very long time.
Yeah, I think there is that, like, a really good point that you were making about the pandemic really brought that resurgence for a lot of people that might not have been in the collecting world or collecting stuff themselves up until then, and then seeing just that, like, I'm at home all day, I want to interact with people or do these things, and finding out, oh, you also used to play this, or you used to do this, and seeing people collect. Like, there's whole YouTube channels and stuff about people collecting and that whole world of it, and reselling is a big thing, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I think even like non-nerdy related stuff, right? There's people that will collect things, like books or movies is a big one. And even now, like movies, we're starting to see a shift in that regard of, the whole streaming aspect, and a lot of people not wanting to have hard copies of things anymore, and kind of shifting that over into that digital aspect. And I feel like it's going to be another one of those, like, okay, yeah, everyone's going to shift and sell their collections of things like movies and books, and then 10, 20 years later, people are going to go, oh, actually, I kind of want that hard copy because it's not on any of the streaming platforms, and I can't watch that movie that I want to watch, or things like. And I think that's part of, in my brain, my justification for continuing to have so many like Blu-rays and DVDs that I have. And it's like, yeah, but I want to watch that. Also, there's certain like movies that I'm like, well, I started collecting all these superhero movies, I might as well just keep collecting the ones that I like. I do need to like decide, because there are certain movies that I go, oh, okay, I really like this director, so I want to collect some of Kevin Smith's or Quentin Tarantino's movies, and add that to my collection of stuff to be able to have. But it's also that space is the biggest challenge, I feel like, with collecting, besides the financial aspect, right? And having to budget it out, is that space, and it's that fine line before you go, okay, how much of a collection can I collect before it gets into that hoarding territory?
Well, and it's funny too, with what you mentioned about digital, and people really going towards digital. Comic books, I think, is one of those things that comes to mind right off the top. There's a lot of resources available for digital downloads of comics and things like that. So a lot of people are reading and getting that. So as technology has kind of developed, has evolved, and people are kind of maintaining hobbies as technology is moving in a very fast direction. It opens or creates an opportunity for people who are collecting the old comics to really invest in that, because I think, as you said, people will, oh, it's available digitally, it's not a problem, and then maybe they don't print as many copies of a certain particular comic, and then you collect that, and it just increases in value, and it justifies that whole idea of holding on to something for longevity's sake, instead of just, oh, I want it, I read it, cast it aside kind of thing. And I think that's goes back to kind of how I see collecting, which is intent to hold on to something, intent to have it for a particular reason, or selling it for a particular reason.
Well, that thing, so like, let me shifting gears and jumping off what you were talking about of that like selling and digital aspect of, there are people that collect retro games and that aspect, which is a new world that I'm starting to learn about and kind of get into. Like, there's a couple of YouTube channels that I really like Retro Rick and Pixel Game Squads and Phoenix Resale, and these collectors that go around. Some of them are, of course, reselling the stuff that they find, but they're hunting for old things. But one interesting thing that they were talking about is that the DS market is exploding because Nintendo has closed their virtual store for DS. So any DS games you cannot download anymore. You need physical copies to be able to play them. So it's like the prices for DS games are going up now because of that, like, the thing we're talking about. Oh, it's not available anymore. There's no more digital media of this. If I want this, I need to get a hard copy of it to be able to play it. And that kicks in that nostalgia kick of people go, oh, I played this game when I was a kid. I still have my DS. Why don't I pick that up? And then I could play it when I want to.
I wish I had known that at an earlier time. Oh man, I had no idea about that, because I not too long ago traded in a bunch of my like DS games and my DS. And it's funny you said that. I went to GameStop to trade in a bunch of stuff, and I got decent, what I consider decent prices for what I'd originally paid for my DS games. but they wouldn't accept the DS, and they said that the DS just was a unit that like Nintendo wasn't supporting anymore. They weren't really selling anymore, and that GameStop themselves had made the decision to kind of cut them out and not buy anymore, not give any credit. So I just walked out of there with, I think I used to buy God of War Ragnarok or something, but walked out there with the collector's DS that I had, but not the games because they just weren't going to accept it. So it's interesting because I had no idea about that, and now I'm kind of regretting that decision. I should have just held on to that.
Well, that's okay. So that's that feeling, right, of people that are flipping or reselling. Like sometimes this happens with Magic cards, or in this case, like games and stuff like that, where you go, "Oh man, if I'm using this as an investment opportunity, am I holding on to this and then flipping it later for a profit?" You always have that kind of like buyer's remorse, or whatever it's called, where you're like, man, if I had just waited a little bit, I could have gotten a little bit more money. And like, how long is too long to hold on to something with that intent to sell it? Like, because you don't want to miss the hype about it, right? If it's like, in Magic's case, like there's going to be a reprint or something of the cards, and so you missed out on it. So now you have to wait even longer before you can sell it for the price, or take a big loss at it, right? Where, there's that whole aspect. So you're someone that has flipped and sold and gotten in and out of collections, so you might be able to speak to that kind of feeling a little bit more as someone who's experienced. Because most of the time I do not flip my collections. I hold on to them. Every now and again I'll do trade-ins like that of, here's a pile of stuff for something that I really want, and I'll do those sort of trades, but not so much as flipping and selling and doing things like that.
Yeah, so I can speak to both the profiting side of it and the the not taking so much. Yeah, taking the L side of it, a big old dip. But yeah, for me personally, it's weird. I have, so what Nan is making a point to is essentially Magic cards, and I've run a couple of different decks throughout the years, and I've also collected various cards from different sets for not only those decks but just collection in general. What I tended to do was I would maybe run one or two decks at a time, and then kind of held some cards off to the side when I could buy them cheap. I got into picking stuff up cheap on eBay. I really got into eBay for a while of just I kind of like the hunt. And I know that some people enjoy that aspect of collecting as well. I definitely do. Feeling like you not necessarily stole something, but you got it at such a good bargain. You're like, oh man, I can't believe this. It feels good. Yeah, it's like that adrenaline rush / endorphins that are going to your head. Like, I got that for like 50% off. So I would do that a lot with Magic cards, and then I would collect a certain amount of things. I'd be like, I have enough for this deck. But I think I wasn't in long term to collect a bunch of cards. I was just trying to kind of, this deck is fun, move on. So I think, throughout the years, I've flipped definitely a couple of decks for sure, entire collections for a whole deck, and I've seen cards go up in value, and I've seen cards drastically go down in value. I think it also depends on like what format you're collecting, and I think that's the other thing that's important to remember is, depending on what items you're collecting, what is being reprinted and so on, and that for Magic, Nan can even talk a little bit more about, and some of our listeners will know, cards getting reprinted just can destroy the value of something. And I know that a lot of people, myself included, have like gotten out, essentially been like, hey, I'm gonna just flip these before they're worth a lot less than what they were before, because I know that they're going to be printed. Sometimes it's just rumors. We've heard people say, this is going to be reprinted in Modern Masters. This is going to be reprinted Modern Masters 2. I mean, Tarmogoyf used to be like a super expensive card, right?
It used to be $100 card, and now you can pick it up for like, I want to say maybe even less than $20. I'm going to look right now. Let's see.
Yeah, no, I'd be curious to find out. But yeah, Tarmogoyf was a super expensive card.
Yeah, you can pick one up for $12 right now.
See, that hurts my feelings.
So that's another, but see, that's an interesting card too. One of those cards that was, one, because of reprints, and two, because of new cards being reprinted to the point where Tarmogoyf is now Tarmogoyf was like one of those like the gold standard of Jund, right? This like
Yes.
pinnacle. You need this if you're going to run this deck, and Jund was just one of those consistently powerful decks. It was good no matter what. It didn't have any like advantage or disadvantage. It was just that 100% middle of the road good cards. But the power creep, which is a whole discussion we'll get into at a later episode when we get deeper into Magic, but I'll highlight it here now. The power creep and the way that cards are printed now just are making Tarmogoyf go, well, it's a vanilla creature that, for 2 mana, maybe it's a 4/5, 3/4. It's fine. But when you're sitting here and doing broken stuff and casting cards for free, and it doesn't hold up as well anymore.
Yeah, it used to be that you would show up with a Tarmogoyf and you're like, oh man, he brought a tank to a gunfight, but now it's like it's a wooden stick. Like it doesn't feel as strong. And it's funny too, because I've always been conflicted with this whole idea of like, I understand the whole like power creep and things like that, but I've also been conflicted with the idea of reprinting so many things and making them more readily available, because I think it's cool to have cheaper accessible cards to let people get into a competitive format for a cheaper value. But it also sucks because like when you manage to get that particular card, you're like, oh, I'm proud I did this or whatever. So it kind of like devalues your efforts for getting into that card sometimes.
Interesting.
At least that's how I see it personally.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it's I definitely felt that with Yu-Gi-Oh. Because I think there was the trading aspect and kind of going back a little bit to buying power, right? When we were little and we were younger, we didn't. It's not like I could just go and swipe my card whenever I wanted something. Right. It was, hey, I did chores or I did work or whatever the case may be, and if I had some extra cash, I'd go buy a pack or whatever. Not most of where we gathered our cards and collected were trading, betting cards, which I know is frowned upon now, but it was a norm for us back in the day. That was, you played for cards, you played for packs. Sometimes you competed in tournaments for prizes, and then you used that prize money to buy more packs and so on. So you kind of had to be resourceful in how you expanded your collection versus now, where it's like, oh, I just have a bag of money lying on the ground, and if I want to use it for whatever, then I will. That's kind of the part of being an adult. But yeah,
that's especially an adult in the nerd scene or the collecting scene, where you go, well, I have these little kid hobbies with adult money, so I'm just gonna throw it at the pay to win aspect of collecting, where you can just be like, I can throw a lot of money at it because that's what I want to do with my money. And I'm one that I have learned over the years that it's better for me to have a nerd budget built in every month. Yes. To say this is what I'm going to spend my nerd money on this month. And as someone that has a diverse collection, it has those months where I go, ooh, I really want to buy this Magic set that's coming out. I'll buy a couple boxes, or a Commander box, or this and that, or a bunch of singles, because I want to build a new deck. And then I go, oh, but I've got back into collecting manga, so I guess I'm going to spend my money buying a bunch of manga books this month instead of buying the Magic cards, and then I'll buy Magic cards next month or something. So it's like, for me, it's finding that balance of where to spend that money, because I have such a diverse collection that I do that. Like board games is another one, right? Both of us have a good board game collection, because it's so great to be able to get people together and play, and you start finding these games or these types of games that you like, and you go, oh, okay, well, what other types of games fit that genre that I'll start collecting and playing, so I can play these with other people. And I'm a big card game person, so it's like the deck building games, I love those, right? So you've got all those different things. DC deck building, you've got things like Clank, you've got things like Dominion, Clank. And now there's even things like Dice Forge, which is like a deck building game but essentially for a dice. So it's like there's like a whole different avenue of that. And board games are not cheap things, so then again, that's like, all right, there's part of that monthly budget that I had for nerd stuff. There's one game gone. So it's interesting. Like if you're younger and you're thinking about getting into collecting, or even if you're older and you're collecting and you're trying to budget and figure it out, it's really just kind of that priority, right? Where I can sit there and look and go, oh, I know that next month I'm going to have a bunch of people getting together. We're going to need to play more board games, so this month I'm going to save my money so I can buy a new board game to play with everybody. Or I go, well, it's, I know it's going to be 2 months before I see everybody. I can be able to, spend some stuff for me for a little bit and buy Magic cards or buy books that I want to read, or buy, movies, and find that avenue that I want to collect. There's also a bunch of like different groups that exist, Facebook's groups, Discords, Reddits, like all different things about collecting and stuff like that, and finding that group that can be like, oh, there's sales and discounts on these places, and do find this stuff, and do like there's so many resources now in the age of the internet that like weren't really there when we were younger and starting to get into collecting cards and stuff.
Oh, pardon me. Yeah, no, that's a good point too, because I was listening to you say about like discounts and things of that. So I think the other thing to mention too is it's I think nowadays it can be a little bit discouraging to get into certain collections because the price of everything has just skyrocketed. So people who were collecting because of nostalgia have just benefited from that, as is the nature of collecting anything in general. But I think that's a very good point that I would say to anyone who's looking to get into Magic, or collecting Gunpla, or collecting whatever it is that you'd like to collect, as well as other hobbies. There's always discounts. There's always groups that you can join to kind of give you some hints on how to get into collection. For Magic, for example, there's a lot of starter decks and a lot of commander decks that get sold out if you're looking to get into Commander or any sort of other format that sure may not give you every single super powerful expensive card that you're going to need to win some regional tournament if that's what your intent is, but it's a good avenue to get started. Once you get enough of those decks, some tend to have some decent or powerful cards in there that are staples in a lot of different decks. So it really comes down to kind of what Nan was saying a little bit earlier, budgeting and planning. I think you could be as young as you want to be or as old as you want to be and start collecting and set yourself a budget and just be smart about it and enjoy it. That's the thing that I want to make sure that is the takeaway from, at least for me personally, from our discussion today, is the whole idea of collecting is enjoying it and having fun, looking at your collection and feeling joy, feeling pride, feeling something from that, instead of, oh, I just spend more money. Enjoying what it represents for you and what you intent behind it, or intent behind it. Sorry.
No, that's really like that intent behind it is, I think, that the big idea. And we, you brought this up, especially at the top of the show, right? It's like, what's your intent with it? Like, are you getting it to collect, or are you getting it to sell it? Regardless, you can do both, right? You can start a collection and make that choice of, oh, I need to pivot. I need to change because I'm more interested in this. I really want to get this really awesome, big, expensive thing, so I know I need to downsize my collection to get this awesome thing. And you have to sometimes make sacrifices when it comes to that collection of making those choices. Okay, how can I get to what I want that will bring me that joy when it comes to this hobby, this of collecting things? Like, I'm one that it's like I like to put things on display. I like to have stuff tucked away. Like, I've got a different mix of things that I go, okay, I know that these parts of my collection are eventually going to get sold off, and I try to keep those separate so I don't become too attached to them by putting them on display with some of the other stuff. Because like things that I readily use or want to show off, I'll put those out more forefront so I can appreciate them. Or some of the stuff I go, if I become too attached to this by being on display, I'm not going to want to flip this or not going to want to sell this. So I need to keep it tucked away so I don't end up doing that.
Well, and that's the thing too, is it's like it's good to kind of, again, that kind of goes back to the whole planning thing. Sometimes you do flip collections and you might that's the cool thing about collecting, right? You can more or less pivot however you want. It doesn't mean you have to sell your collection. It doesn't mean you have to give up collecting. It just requires you to kind of think ahead and plan kind of what direction you're going to go. If it means selling a certain part of your collection to collect something else, and you want to get into that, then so be it. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's funny because, like you said, it really is. I think as we've gotten older and trying to be, for me personally, trying to be a responsible adult, it's not just blow my budget on every single thing I want. It's what do I want? You know, I laughed pretty hard because I've gotten into playing Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice for the first time, and there was a limited edition wolf statue that came back in the studio that I was following for, and they're like, you've been selected to purchase a statue. And I was like, I really, really want to pull the trigger on this and buy the statue. But, like you said, I had bought some Gundam stuff that I wanted, you know, some kits that I wanted to build, and I bought a couple things, some tools and stuff to kind of help that my process and make it a little bit smoother. So I held off and was like, if it comes back again someday, cool. If not, at some point, if I want it bad enough, I'll hunt it down and find it from someone else who's taking care of it and enjoying it as much as I'll hopefully enjoy it as well.
And that adds that extra fun to it too, of the hunt, right? We talked about it earlier of like, oh, you're like on eBay and you found this for cheap or something like that, and like, you know, the hunt of going and finding those deals. Like I enjoy that too when I go to conventions for Magic and stuff like that, and going to different booths and pricing out, or like looking for signed cards, or you know, hunting for these specific things, or looking for artists to get things signed, and you know, that aspect, or people that are into the retro gaming world of going and trying to find those deals of, I'm trying to collect all of the NES games, or you know, all the original Xbox games, and they're, you know, that's their hunt, and that's part of the fun of collecting for some people, which I would recommend. If you are a collector, try it out. It is a lot of fun to go hunting for things.
It's funny, I forgot to mention it earlier when we were talking about retro games, but I don't know if anyone who's listening may be familiar with this game, but there's an old game on Nintendo 64 called Ogre Battles 64. It is probably one of my top favorite games of all time, and I'd say at least top 5 favorite games of all time. And when I originally got this game, it was back in like the 2000s when the Nintendo 64 first came out, and it was a game that was like a limited release game, if I remember correctly. And the only reason I was able to get it is there was a place called Video Den, which was a video game rental place that we would visit often because it was cheaper to spend $5 for a week's worth of game than it was to go and spend $40 or $30 on a game, right? So the gentleman who worked the shop owned the place, and he saw that I'd loved the game so much as I ended up renting it for 2 weeks in a row. He offered to sell it to me, which I 100% didn't even think about it, and bought it because I played that game probably way more than any human should play any game. And I looked not too long ago. I've looked a couple of times, and because of the whole retro gaming and that collecting aspect, a game that was like $30-$40 back in the day is upwards of $200 to $300, and this is for a Nintendo 64. So it's not like it's a current modern day system. It's not like it's modded. It's not like it's something you can play anywhere. It's a retro Nintendo 64 game that is selling for a decent amount of price.
I just looked it up. It's like $120 loose, and that means like just the game. That means no box, no manual, no nothing, just the game itself. The cheapest that you can find right now is $120. If you're looking for getting like box and manual and things like that, it's that, you know, $200, $300, $400 for this thing.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's the one thing as a kid that I don't know why my brain just told me, like, hey, you know, another thing is like, throw the box away, you don't care about it. But for that one, I did keep the manual and I kept the box because I think I just had like such a love for this game that I wanted to keep everything on it, you know. And I remember cleaning the cartridge and being a complete little psychopath about it. But it's interesting to see kind of like that aspect of it too. Sometimes some things you just hold on because of fun.
Do you still have it then?
Oh yeah, I still have it.
Nice.
It's one of the few Nintendo 64 games I still have.
So what 64 games do you have? So you got that one.
I believe I still have the old Super Smash Bros. Mm-hmm. I think I have Donkey Kong, and then I'd have to go look. I
Maybe
have
a Mario
couple
Party
more.
in there too.
Yeah, I want to say yes.
Yeah,
Because we played a lot of Mario Party. Like, a lot of Mario Party.
Do you still have your GameCube? Do you have, like, that stuff with it? Or have you since parted ways with those systems as you've gotten more up into... Because you have, what, like, PS5 and...
Yeah, I have a PS5, and I was a Microsoft Xbox fanboy for quite a while. So I missed out on... Which is funny, because you would think the opposite, since I'm a huge fan of action role-playing games and stuff, and kind of Sony is known for that, versus Xbox is known for, like, you know, shoot guns and that kind of stuff, shooters and such. But yeah, no, I believe it might be stored somewhere. It's not... if I have my GameCube or any other older system, there was no intention of keeping it. It just happened to stay.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So,
yes, that makes sense.
So to be fair, for anyone who's listening, I am not a retro gaming collector. I just happen to have my old systems hiding somewhere in utter darkness.
In utter dark. Well, I was thinking about that the other day too, of like where, you know, my parents are moving, and they were a couple of years ago. They were, I think, got rid of like the old PlayStations and all the like you know, Guitar Hero good controllers and all these things that it's like, nobody wants those, who, you know, and now they're, you know, they're probably worth like a good chunk of money at this point in time, but just one of those things that you like stuff that you know, you had as a kid or whatever, or played younger, actually has a value, even if it might not be for you. Some other people might find it, you know, as something. Oh, I remember that when I was a kid. I like that and stuff. But I don't know. I think the retro gaming and that sort of collecting world is fascinating to me as someone that's like, you know, I grew up with the PlayStation and computer. So like the computer stuff is much more of the way that I played games, other than TCGs and stuff. But like the people that were console gamers and like grew up with Nintendo and Sega and that whole era of games is so interesting. You know, how much of a nostalgia kick that is for so many people. That, you know, I get it from the things like the Pokemon and the Yu-Gi-Ohs and the things like that. Or like, I still play original StarCraft, so like I don't.
Oh, yes, you do, good sir.
Draw to it, like it makes sense to me that people are drawn in by that. But I don't know, the whole retro gaming is so fascinating to me, I think.
Well, yeah, it's funny too, because I think it's a community aspect, or there's a community aspect to it in terms of not only just collecting, but like gaming and competitive card games and things like that. And that's what's so cool, like to have groups and things like that, which again also kind of saw a huge spike during peak pandemic and things of that nature. But you're right, it's the nostalgia factor of certain, like I said, I got excited and happy just now talking about Ogre Battles, you know, and having that game still. I probably won't ever get rid of it, and it'll be a line item on my will someday. But
you could do what I've done now, is that, because I have a 64 from when I went to college and was playing, like freshman year, we were playing Smash and stuff like that. I currently, because we bought new bookshelves in the basement to put all the board games, and now I've put the 64 there with Smash in it, just up on one of the shelves now on display.
Oh,
so
heck,
do that too. Put that with the Ogre Battles. Just
I might have to. You know, it's really funny. I saw the memory expansion pack thing that you had to put in the Nintendo 64 to be able to play like Donkey Kong, to be able to play, what was it, GoldenEye? No, GoldenEye didn't need it, or it did. I can't remember, but there's like a memory thing that you had to buy. I believe that's also like people are collecting that too, or that's really hard to come by. Yeah. From back in the day. So it's really funny that like all these things that we took for granted back in the day are worth so much more now, and especially to someone who might want that particular item. So that's the other thing I would say. Maybe things that it's never too late to start, and some of the stuff that you start collecting now may end up spiking in value or being worth a lot more in the future. So again, just gonna encourage people to get into something if that's what they're interested in.
Right, and that's the thing. It's like I think there's something to be said about I'm getting into this with the hope that it's going to make money.
Sure.
Or I'm getting into this because I like this thing, right? That intent. And if your intent is to make money, that's great. There's a lot of ways that you can check the pulse on the nerd culture and collecting world and see what's going to be, making money and doing things like that and worth it in the end.
Yeah, for sure. I think it just, like, for me personally, it just goes back to that whole nostalgia thing. I think of kind of where I got started and kind of what I like now, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon. I often have to be responsible and prevent myself from making it worse. Again, anyone who does Gunpla, the word backlog is something that is very, very common. I used to think it was just me. Honestly, it was really funny when I got into the hobby. I had a bunch of boxes stacked up, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I'm hoarding these. I'm not collecting these. I'm literally hoarding them because I haven't done anything with them." And then I joined a couple Facebook groups and were reading, and people were using the word backlog, and people had like double the amount of boxes, triple the amount of boxes, and I was like, okay. All right, this is okay. This is obviously the standard. I'm good to go.
It becomes normal. Yeah, look, the same thing is true for Warhammer. People that collect or play or build or with Warhammer, you just start getting boxes and boxes of like unbuilt minis because you're like, well, it takes me so much time to commit to building and painting and setting it up and getting it ready the way I want. Then it's like, but then something new comes out, or you find access to this other army or this other model, and you go, ooh, I guess I could just get that, and I'll get to it later. And then it's part of the fun, because once you have it, even just having the boxes are cool to be able to see. Like, oh, when I get to that, it's going to be great.
Yeah, and it's they kind of have a presence too, right? I'll have to take a picture of just kind of the pile of boxes I have for my Gundam model kits right now, but they do look cool, and you're just like, I'm going to get to that, and when I get to that, it's going to look really cool on the on the display that it comes with. But
all right, so I think we're getting close to let's think anything else that we miss with the collection world. Like we've kind of gone over like what our collections are. You've talked about like your Gundam stuff. You of course have video games. You still have some of your like TCG related stuff, or at least that's where you started. Are there any other collections that we didn't talk about or miss that you think like jump out at you that you like are really cool that you're still into? Or are there any collections that you are no longer collecting that you still have?
Not entirely. I think the last thing that I would say that I would somewhat collect and probably will continue to collect is like statues in general. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge fan of a bunch of different genres and games and things like that. Currently, I have actually on my desk I have Illidan from World of Warcraft as one of the statues that came out by Blizzard, and then I have a couple of Overwatch statues behind me, which interestingly enough, we were talking about selling and buying new collections. I will probably be selling my Overwatch statues. With a lot of things, as anyone who might be listening knows, when certain things become like short print or limited series, they tend to go up in value. I have a Diva statue from Blizzard Gaming that I bought back when it was on like super sale, like super sale, because it's an expensive piece anyways, and it just never got re-released. It was a one-time one and done, and it sells for a lot on eBay. Nice. I don't have the original box, but it's selling for quite a bit just because not a lot of people sell them, and there isn't that much availability. But there's a couple other ones that I want to get for like other games that I enjoy, like Diablo and things like that. So yeah, statues is definitely the other thing. I could have definitely gone overboard with that, and that's been one of those things where planning, budgeting, showing some restraint is definitely the best way to do it, because they can get really expensive and you could go down a rabbit hole. Oh, I like this game, I need a Mega Man statue, and oh, I like Legend of Zelda, I'm gonna buy a Link statue, and you just You just go down a deep vortex.
What was the first statue that you bought?
The first statue I bought, I think, is Reaper from Overwatch.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one was Mercy. And then I was waiting on Diva because I was like, I can't justify spending that much money on a statue. And it went on sale, and it was like on super sale, and I just pulled the plug.
It up. Yeah.
I think I picked that in Illidan around the same time.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen statues, and they come across my radar every now and again. Like, specifically, I've seen some really cool Elite Four Pokemon statues.
Yeah.
I've seen some really sweet Akatsuki from Naruto statues. And those are the only ones that, like, really, like, make me stop and think and go, those look really, really cool. But I have nowhere good to like display them or put them as part of the problem. And I think that's the only reason why I have not gotten into the statue collection game, is because I go, I got nowhere to put these.
Yeah, it's funny you say the Akatsuki, because that's on my radar. There's a couple different studios that I have like bookmarked and saved of statues that eventually I'm going to try to get the whole Akatsuki collection and have all those statues and kind of where to go look for them, because again, those aren't necessarily cheap either, because those are limited release. So if you don't get it the first go round, you're basically paying from someone who's either selling their piece or bought it with the intent to make more money on it, and obviously selling their piece at that point. So
yeah, that makes sense. All right, so I think we're at a good like wrap up period. Feel like we've gotten through and at least hit all the main points that we wanted to talk about when it comes to collecting, or at least the collecting world from our perspectives of things. So this is the shift of gears from the podcast that has been much more short form, 20-minute episodes, to now we're getting into kind of a little bit long form, trying to shoot for around an hour, give or take. We'll see, depending on the topic of things. But because we're in that kind of a wrap-up period, we're going to kind of pose that question that we try to end the episode with, of kind of, what are you watching, what are you playing, what are you reading, what are you doing right now to consume your time? So, Jaime, what you got? What you got going on?
Yeah, so I think I'm basically buying some. So as some might know, Diablo 4 is coming out in the following weeks. I love Diablo. I've been a fan of that game for a very long time. So I've been buying my time between doing some World of Warcraft Mythic Plus. I just recently got back into retail and doing that Mythic Plus grind, and then just building some kits. So I believe I have a Gundam Aerial, Full Mechanics Aerial, that I'm going to probably start tonight, to be honest with you. And then I'm going to get into my first Perfect Grade Gundam, the Granddaddy Gundam. So I'll be doing that, and then Diablo 4 is going to be taking up my whatever available spare time I have left.
Which we'll do a whole episode about Diablo after the release, once we kind of get a feel for it a little bit more. Probably once we max out, then we'll do a little bit of a dive into it, so you guys can hear a little our opinions of the game and stuff, since we've been playing Diablo for years. When it comes to stuff that I'm watching, playing, doing, like I'll leave you with the same kind of thing. Here's what we're looking forward to. We got Spider-Verse coming up.
Yes.
So we're real hyped about that. We'll be talking a little bit about Marvel soon related to that. Got back into Hearthstone again, since everybody's kind of on the Battlegrounds kick right now. So that's kind of the main game that I'm playing at this point in time. Watching stuff, I'm not really watching it. Barry. Barry is back. For anybody that is a fan of that HBO show, final season is on. It is amazing. If you have not watched Barry yet, you should give it a watch. 4 seasons. There's very, very, very good if you are into kind of that intense shows that has a little bit of humor to them.
Ooh, okay. I'm gonna have to write that one down. I you know what? I apologize to everyone. I should have recommended a show. We recently watched Beef not too long ago.
I have not finished it yet.
I won't spoil anything for anyone, but it is really good. So if you're looking for a good show and you got a few hours to burn through, a couple weeks, it's definitely a
Yes.
must-watch.
I also would recommend that one. I started it, and it is very good. So, yeah, there's a lot of great stuff right now to be watching, guys. But that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening. We are going to be switching over and doing some video versions of the podcast coming up soon, but at least, wanted to get the kind of new revamped podcast going in audio form. So, this is, of course, available on iTunes, Spotify, kind of anywhere you can expect to be able to find podcasts. Feel free, rate it if you like it. Spread the word, let people know. But that's going to do it for us here today, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening, and we'll see you guys next game.
Take care, everybody.
All right, now you can just press stop on Audacity.